We are back. Today I'm talking to Vince, and Vince is the owner of powersbc.com, which is a PR agency. And we're tackling and just talking about the conversation, the challenge of growing your team when you're trying to scale your business. So I'm excited that Vince has been able to agree to kind of open up his his challenges and his personal journey. So I'm excited to learn from your experience. So Vince Powers, let me talk to you guys a little bit about who Vince is. He is the founder and president of Powers Brand Communications. They are an award-winning PR agency here in the Philadelphia area, and he's been the recipient of many awards, including Philadelphia Business Journal 40 Under 40 Award. Now, Vince's clients, they range from emerging growth companies to nationally recognized brands in the consumer, retail, and B2B sectors, as well as he tackles a lot of and helps a lot of franchisees and franchisors. So if you'd like to connect with Vince, his website again is powersbc.com. But we are here today to talk about his challenges. So anyway, welcome, Vince. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes. So this series really allows us to just talk about, what are the lowest low points in your journey as an entrepreneur and in growing your business. Would you consider your business a family-run business?
No, I started it.
Okay. Um, I thought for some reason you were working with your wife or whatnot, but all right,
No.
you can get that, skip that part. But anyway, so talk to me about what was one of the lowest points in your journey, and talk to me about what you did to overcome that.
So thanks very much for this opportunity. So I would say instead of one of the lowest points, maybe one of the hardest points when I started this firm 10 years ago. And previously I had worked for large firms. I'd worked for a large international firm based out of Washington, D.C. We had several offices, several hundred people. I worked for a larger firm up here in the Philadelphia region, again, between both the public relations and advertising, north of 100 people. When I started this firm 10 years ago, it was all of a sudden it was me. So, I was trying to figure out, how do I build my business? When do I hire? And who do I hire? And I was trying to do everything kind of myself in the beginning.
Right.
So one of the things that I learned early on was, contractors are not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
When I started to have a certain level of work coming in, I reached out to some people that I knew who didn't necessarily want full-time work for whatever reason. They just wanted 10, 15 hours a month, maybe 20 hours a month. And they had certain areas of expertise that I did not, like copywriting or design or research. And, it took me about the first 18 to 24 months to really feel comfortable to bring on contractors. And you get to a point where they feel like employees. And the great thing about contractors, quite honestly, is you can test drive each other. They can work with you. You can work with them. If it's not the right fit, no harm, no foul. I just don't give them any more business. I've had a couple of contractors who have become employees. They've started as contractor, went to part-time employee, and then full-time employee. So that was terrific because it kind of gave me an opportunity to see, what their strengths were, how would they fit in with my organization, my culture. And then for them as well, does my firm fit in with their lifestyle, their work-life balance? So I think that was one of the hardest things, was really kind of going from large to, just one person and trying to figure out how to do it all. And I pivoted towards the contractor model. Now, obviously, I have full-time employees as well as part-time and still contractors.
So that's how you built, when you first started your agency from 0 to 6 figures, is gathering a team of contractors.
Yeah, pretty much.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So then you did that. Was there a mindset shift that had to happen where was your strongest or most, I guess, difficult mindset shift in that journey?
Yeah, again, great question. So again, when I started, I didn't want to turn away any business. So we would service clients across a variety of industries. The only industry we didn't touch was pharma and life sciences, because that's such a niche. We were doing everything from um, consumer marketing to professional services and B2B to nonprofit to higher education to manufacturing, sort of all across the board. And that was great. And the great thing about agencies is, you can work on a variety of clients. Um, One of the shifts I had to make was to shed some of those clients and some of those sectors that really wasn't our sweet spot, and to focus on an area that I felt had a great opportunity for growth. And we had pretty good success, and that's when we kind of launched our franchise practice. We'd kind of done some things in the franchise space. We'd worked with one or two franchise brands. I had kind of looked around and started talking to a number of franchise brands, and felt like there was really a good need for a strong public relations firm, both at the franchisor and franchisee level. So that was kind of scary, because we shed a lot of our clients and industries and said, we're going to really focus on our franchise practice and then also kind of our retail and consumer practice. So now we have two primary practice groups. What tends to surface is other organizations will come to us with project work, which is great. We can handle that, whether it's in higher ed or manufacturing. But as far as a business development and how we're going to grow to where we want to be, we really focus on those two practice groups.
So when you said a minute ago that you shed some of your other, industries, does that mean you fired your clients, or you let them know you're not going to be able to work with them anymore?
Well, we didn't fire them per se, but we didn't actively try to pursue growing in that space.
Gotcha.
And the majority of those were project-based to begin with. So when the project ended, it was just sort of a natural segue. And if they came back to me, then I would say, you know what, we're probably not the right fit for this next project, but let me give you somebody who would be a good fit for you. And I did that with a few of the clients to say, they'll be a good fit for you. And, it all ended on a very good note.
Yes. Nice. Okay. Gotcha. And then you really just focused on the three different niches you're honing in on now.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So that was a big mindset shift. And I think a lot of business owners definitely struggle with the same thing, especially in the early years, or at least if they're trying to vamp up or revamp, for some people who've really been hit hard since the pandemic, and just trying to take that any kind of work. So in the midst, and I know you shared it, and I just want to kind of drill down a little bit more into the details. How did you kind of monitor yourself, or how did you push yourself to resist on taking clients that just didn't fit the niche that you're focused on? What was it that helped you say no?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy, because again, you don't want to ever turn away business. But in the same regard, if I didn't feel like we were the right firm for a client that was coming to us, I would be honest and say that. I wasn't trying to pretend we were something that we weren't, or try to do something that really maybe we were not the best fit. And I would always try to point them in the right direction. Say, hey, I know this firm over here would be a good fit, or this contractor over here would be a good fit and be able to handle you. So it's difficult, but I think that I knew in the big picture, in the long run, if we focused on our primary practice groups, we would be more effective, and we would grow the way I wanted to grow in the long run.
Mm. So what would you say to somebody who's in a similar, situation, but what's happening for them is they want a niche, they don't have enough clients in that niche, and then they're attracting clients they don't want them from that, an area, an industry they don't really want to get a lot of work from, and yet money is screaming. It seems like it's money talking, as in, hey, if I say no to this project, we're not going to have any cash flow coming in the door, and yet they're not the right type of work that we want to do. What would you say to the person who's struggling in that, that cycle?
Yeah, again, great question. I mean, obviously, the first goal of any business is to stay afloat, is to stay, cash flow positive. So you have to get to a point where you're comfortable enough to be able to say, you're probably not the right fit for us. If they're early stage and they're still trying to get to a cash flow positive position, then yeah, they probably want to work on some of that. The other thing is, if they don't necessarily know what that niche might be, again, we did a lot of sectors early on.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of gave us an opportunity to see, you know, where our strengths would lie and what we would have most interest in and where we would be the best fit for clients. So it's a tough decision. It's a tough call to make at a certain point. It probably took us, 3 or 4 years to get to that, to where we said, you know what, this is where really what we're going to focus on. It didn't happen in the first 90 days to 6 months.
I'm glad you shared that it took you 3 to 4 years. If you had to look back and if there were any strategies that you can think of if you had to redo it, would there have been anything that would have helped you shortcut that and shrink that down?
Well, I think, you know, business development is always going to be on the minds of a small business owner, because our job is not only business development and to manage the clients and my employees, um, and it's hard to kind of do all of that. And I experimented with a couple of things. At one point, I totally outsourced our business development,
Mm-hmm.
and I basically hired an individual um, who served as our director of business development. And it was about a 6 month process, and it was a good learning exercise. One of the things was he was able to generate leads, but they weren't really the right leads. They weren't the best fit for us. There's a certain size of client and brand that we tend to work best with,
Mm-hmm.
and he was able to make some introductions and get some meetings, but they weren't the right ones. So I've gone back and forth with how to best handle business development.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, a lot of it still falls on me and my senior team. For us, we know our firm better than anybody, so that if we are talking to somebody or meeting somebody at a conference or at a networking event, you know, that's still going to be our best way to generate leads, because it's still about networking and relationships and kind of getting out there. Um, and it was about a 6 to 9 month process. It's something I still, I'm still trying to learn from other entrepreneurs. How do you do biz dev? I ask people that all the time
Mm-hmm.
when I sit down with them. How do you do your business development? And there's lots of different ways, and you just sort of see what works and see what sticks and see what doesn't.
Mm. So, if our viewers can learn from some of those mistakes, or even just not necessarily mistakes, but just what didn't work, right? So, you had a business development person that you hired, and then was that person a contractor or an employee?
Contractor.
Contractor. So, were they
Mhm.
dedicated to business development to you full time, or was that a part time gig for them?
No, I think this individual worked for a company that did that, and specifically within the marketing, advertising, and PR industry.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I think each biz dev person probably has 2 or 3 agencies they're working for. And they weren't based in the Philadelphia region. They were based in the Midwest,
Mm-hmm.
because we work with a lot of national brands. So it wasn't like they were trying to get meetings just here in the Philadelphia market. Um, but no, I mean, they were uh, 15, 20 hours a month or so, probably dedicated to the business.
And are you still working with that contractor?
I'm not.
Mhm. So if viewers could learn from what didn't work, when you said they didn't bring you the right leads, what do you think was their approach or process? What didn't work about the end result was that they didn't bring you the right leads? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I'll just give you an example. In the franchise category,
Okay.
there are a lot of emerging brands. An emerging franchise brand may have 1 or 2 or 3 locations. And um, a brand that's further along in its, life cycle will have 50, 75, 100 plus franchisees or locations. Um, we typically work with brands that are franchise brands that have 50 plus. Some of our clients have over 100, 150 franchisees or territories or locations if it's a retail brand. Um, he was making more traction introductions with brands at the emerging that had one, two, three, or four. And again, there's nothing wrong with those, but they weren't really the best fit for us. I'm sure there are firms or maybe contractors that would do a great job with an emerging brand, but that's a harder brand for us with our team to service.
Right. Gotcha.
And we told them that in the beginning. We said this is our criteria, our specs that we're looking for. But it was probably easier for him to get the meetings with the emerging brands, so that's kind of where he gravitated.
Gotcha. Okay, so definitely didn't work for what you were looking for as far as they were too small, and you did give them the criteria, they just didn't follow through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you could give us one or two of tactics of what's really working the best, and I know we're going down a little rabbit hole because our topic is really about challenging the challenges
Mhm.
of hiring. But just out of curiosity, can you give our viewers a little bit more on what has been working better for BizDev?
Yeah, I mean, if you do good work,
Mhm.
people tell their colleagues, they tell other people they work with. So again, in the franchise category, I'll just give you that as an example again. If we're working with a franchisee that might own 8 or 10 locations of a particular franchise brand, and we do a good job, they send an email to 10 of their colleagues, and all of a sudden we're doing work for 40 or 50 locations around the country. So it's easy for me to say, you know, we're a strong firm and we've got great capabilities and we would do a great job for you. But it is so much stronger when somebody does that on our behalf. And they do it without us even knowing it, quite honestly.
That's
They'll reach out to their colleagues and then they'll circle back and say, hey, Vince or Karen, who runs my franchise practice,
Mhm.
FYI, I sent this email out. You might be getting some of my colleagues reaching out to you. So again, if we just focus on doing a really good job, and then obviously we try to stay visible on social media. We've got some junior staff and they're always posting because that's important, just to have a presence. People need to know what you're up to. And then, every now and then there's certain awards that come up that, if it makes sense, we'll apply for those things, just sort of go towards the credibility factor of an agency when some clients are looking at agencies.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. If they're looking at a PR agency, they naturally want to see what's the PR that the PR agency has for themselves.
Yeah. Right.
But to what you said, surprisingly, I think that is a foundational principle that a lot of people can easily forget. The best marketing is that you do brilliant work and
Right.
you don't let up on these little sloppy kind of negative experiences. Um,
Hmm.
and I know, just as an example, I mean, somebody was trying to solicit me, and I wasn't going to accept the phone call invitation, but because they offered, oh, by the way, just for booking this uh, coffee together or whatever, virtual coffee, we're going to send you a DoorDash lunch on us. And I just thought that was clever. And I thought, oh, all right, you know what? That was such a great idea. I'm just going to give you the meeting because I think that was really clever. And
Yeah.
they never follow through, and it's not like I care about a $10 DoorDash lunch, but it sticks with you to say,
Yeah.
oh, well, my first experience, you said this, and you didn't
Hmm.
follow through. And it
Hmm.
turns out there was two other things that they said they would do, and they didn't do. So it was just even little things like, oh, I'm going to set up a meeting with you, and then they swapped, and I had a meeting with one of their colleagues, a junior
Hmm.
associate, And I thought, no, I took the meeting because it was you, not
Hmm.
because it was a junior associate. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's just giving some specifics to really the same thing about pay attention to your work. Uh,
Yeah.
and I even sent them a little email to say, hey, by the way, I thought it was really clever, that DoorDash idea. And I thought maybe it would spark some hello. Uh,
Hmm.
but that awareness of quality, are you doing what you say? Do you deliver on what you say? And then do you over deliver, of course, is
Right.
what we all hope we can do. So that's very powerful what you shared, that your
Yeah.
marketing is doing great work.
Yeah.
Love that. So going back to, you're growing your agency. You started out
Hmm.
10 years ago. You started out with contractors, and you folded in some employees.
Hmm.
What in your journey of hiring your team, both employees and contractors, what do you think, as you look back, were some bigger hiring mistakes that other people can now learn from?
Yeah, good question. So I think one of the things is be careful of references. You meet a candidate, and most of the candidates who come to me, quite honestly, are within my network or my broader network. People refer them to me. Hey Vince, um, you know, my cousin is in the public relations field and moving from Philadelphia to Philly back from Washington. Could you meet with them? Great, perfect. Sort of that warm introduction. I love those kinds of introductions. But obviously, sometimes we have to just post because we're looking to hire, and we just get resumes in, and we always say, could you share with us two or three references? The references are always going to be glowing, or why would they, not give them as a reference? And I've just been, pretty surprised sometimes. The person sharing the reference talks about this individual, and then you get them in, and you think, that's not quite right. So just be careful of references. Understand that, people who are giving them realize that they're trying to build up the candidates, whether it was a professor at a university, or if they had an internship somewhere or something like that. Obviously, they want to build up that individual, but you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, I think, sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that that's important. And you actually checked on the references. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who I later find out they never even call the references because you're in such a hurry to hire and you want to get that position filled because you're overwhelmed and you've got way too much on your plate. So that's great that you even called the references, but to what you said, yes, to be careful and mindful of that they may not always match up. Do you do any
Mhm.
hiring assessments when you're hiring, just to kind of see what their personalities are? I'm curious what your experience with assessments have been.
Give me an example. What do you mean by
Assessments
assessment?
like maybe
Hiring assessment.
like a disc personality assessment. There's the Colby test. Just curious if you ever tried.
No, no. I mean, it was harder during the pandemic when you could only meet them via Zoom.
Right.
I made a couple hires during the pandemic. Um, again, I have a much better feel when I can sit down with somebody in person and see how they just talk and answer questions. You get a pretty good feel for, how will they be in sort of day to day as a colleague, in front of clients, working with my other employees, my other staff. I think you can get a pretty good feel for that.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. Being able to see
Hmm.
people face to face, it makes a big difference for
Hmm.
sure. So we're talking about some hiring mistakes. If you had to think of just overall, just any kind of what do you think was a decision that you made in the past that turned out to be an expensive mistake, and how did you recover from it? Is there any other mistakes that you can address and talk about how you recovered
From a hiring standpoint,
from any
specifically.
business standpoint? Any other?
Uh,
One of the things we always talk about is it's always better to learn from the mistakes of others, and this is our opportunity to share with our audience. Uh, how they can avoid some costly mistakes.
I think, again, just the lesson of trying not to be everything to everybody. And again, in my world, in the agency world, there are PR firms, there are ad agencies, there are digital firms, there are social media firms, there are the quote unquote full service agencies that are trying to do everything to everybody. And I always felt like if you could stay in your lane with your primary area of expertise, you would be able to do that really well, as opposed to an agency that says they do everything, but they do everything kind of average or kind of mediocre. And it's a hard thing to do because, again, when you're starting out, you don't want to turn away business. You don't want to turn away revenue. You don't want to turn away clients. But I think you need to be true to yourself and say, well, this is really what what I'm really good at, or this is what's really going to differentiate me from my competitors. So I'm going to stick to this. And again, to what we talked about earlier, it's a fine line. You need to sort of get the business up and going. And then maybe you can figure out from there what's the best path forward. And it's a bit of a process. There's no formula that someone says on day one, I'm going to do this for 2 years. And then from years 2 to 5, I'm going to do this. And then 5 to 10. You have an idea, but you really need to be open-minded and just sort of flexible and look for opportunities, as you're growing. Again, our whole franchise practice started because one of our clients came to us about 4 years ago and said, we're going to franchise. Can you help us announce it? And we said, sure. We helped them announce it. They went on and sold, 30 franchisees in the next 24 months. We started doing work in each of those 30 markets. And that's when I started to research and get more educated about the franchise world. And that's kind of launched our practice. But it was never on a business plan. I never had written down launched franchise practice. It just kind of evolved. I kept my eyes and ears open, started talking to some people who were smart in that space, attended some conferences so I could learn more about the industry, talk to franchisors, franchisees, try to figure out what the opportunity was. And then that's kind of when we went off and launched it.
I love that. And then you shared earlier about being a specialist and staying in your lane, and that some other agencies they're offering kind of an all-in-one messaging. What can you give our viewers a few examples on, especially for people who aren't as familiar with the whole scope of PR? Maybe they're thinking, oh, it's a news PR is a news release. So talk to us a little bit about where you really shine and maybe some differentiation as far as what if some of your clients shared with you, maybe if they've used an all-in-one agency and what's the difference in a PR from a previous all-in-one agency versus the PR that you do.
Again, I think what it comes down to is that my team members are experts in what they do. So my copywriters are full-time copywriters. They're not doing 10, 12, 14 different things. So it might be as simple as writing a press release, but it has to be a really good, persuasive, interesting, newsworthy press release. And you need somebody who, as a copywriter, who knows how to do that. We're writing, remarks and speeches for, CEOs of companies. So you have to really have somebody who, again, that's their area of expertise. My media relations team, they're the ones who are talking to reporters and editors and producers and bookers. That's their expertise. That's their world. That's what they like to do. And that's primarily what they do. My team that's involved more with our social media, influencers, bloggers, content, again, that's their world. So I think, again, what happens is in a lot of agencies, they have people who are doing a lot of different things, but they're not really experts at any one thing. And, when I started this firm, I said, we're going to stay in our lane with PR and content. And content's all about storytelling.
Mm.
Every brand has a story. Is it interesting? Maybe, maybe not. But part of our job is to figure out how to make it interesting, how to make it resonate, how to make it relevant to, ultimately who you're trying to sell to. And that's not an easy thing to do. Um, so again, when I started with the contractors, it was a good model because I was starting with copywriters or a designer or a media relations person. And again, I sort of, a light went off and I thought, it's a good model because I'm getting clients who are saying to me, what I really like about you guys is that your event team that does event planning and management, they're senior people who've done it.
Mhm.
They're not learning on the job. Your copywriter who's writing this speech for our CEO, you know, loved it. CEO loved it. So, again, it all goes back to if you do quality work, your clients will, be happy, and then they'll refer because they talk to other their colleagues all the time.
Yes. So what I'm hearing, Vince, is from that, especially on our topic of the challenge of hiring and growing your team, what I'm
Mm.
hearing is that you have made a concerted commitment to hire talent,
Mhm.
and that does make a huge difference. Whereas I have seen it happen in many different agencies where, yeah, they're trying to focus on profit margins and hiring the cheapest labor possible, and you can see it. You can see
Mhm.
it in the quality of the work where copywriting isn't actually as easy as it might seem, because
Mhm.
when you read a piece, it just reads like me. Sometimes I read pieces, it sounds like a bot wrote it. It
Yeah.
just
Right.
doesn't quite have any substance. It just says a lot of verbiage, but didn't really say anything insightful. So that's what I'm hearing, is that you have committed to hiring higher level talent, and that has really helped you get those unsolicited um, word of mouth referrals, and landing even more franchise clients just from doing great work. So
Mhm.
yeah, I love that you weren't afraid to do that, because I just, from my view, I do see it happening a lot
Mhm.
in businesses who are trying to just to have a fatter cash flow. And
Right.
yeah, so it's easy to kind of cut corners and skimp on putting a junior person, or just somebody who's maybe not even that advanced in their craft.
Mhm.
So somebody can say that they're a full-time copywriter or a full-time this or that, but then when you look at their work, they just aren't that strong in
Right.
skill set. So
Right.
um, yeah, that was very valuable. Huge,
Good.
huge. Well, if you have any other words of advice to our audience of agency owners or just business owners who are maybe at that three, I've got 3 employees or 5 employees, and they're trying to scale their company to the next level, uh, in hiring their dream team. If you have any final words of advice, what would that be, Vince?
Yeah. And again, this kind of goes into what you do with your firm. Find individuals who are sort of in your space, in your category. So understand, for me, people that understand agency and how agencies work and how agencies are structured, um, and see if you can touch base with them, 2, 3, 4 times a year, and just pick their brain. There's an individual that I work with. I don't work with, but I reach out to him a couple of times a year. He and I worked together in Washington D.C. for a number of years. You know, 25 years ago, he built an agency, sold it. He basically is retired, but I reach out to him a couple of times a year and just touch base. And that kind of third party feedback is helpful because we get so busy being, you know, in the weeds, looking at the day to day, that we need that person to come in and help us take a step back and look at big picture. And that's a hard thing to do. That's, because we're always just looking at kind of day to day.
Yes, absolutely. And oftentimes your employees aren't going to have the assertiveness to
Mhm.
maybe cross that line and say, hey, by the way,
Yeah,
and it's just not their place. So
right.
no one else is holding you accountable or just giving you that observation that nobody else has really articulated.
Mhm.
So great. I love that. Love that advice. And then for people who want to learn more about your PR agency and want to connect with you to see how you can help them, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Sure. Well, the website is Powers BC, be like boy, C like cat, and that stands for Powers Brand Communications.com. So powersbc.com. And then my email is vpowers, VPOWERS at powersbc.com. That'd be the easiest way to get in touch with me. And I promise I'll get back as quickly as I can.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being candid and sharing about your personal journey in growing your agency. And I'm excited to see more franchisors being helped by your PR agencies.
Well, great. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope this was helpful and beneficial to, some of the entrepreneurs out there. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me if it'd be helpful.